We'll shift our attention to the state of the county. Scott will get that set up, and while he's working on that, just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, everything that you'll see today, presented today, will be online. You'll be able to get to all the slides and everything via our website. Secondly, we will, at the conclusion of the presentation, take questions and comments. At that time. We will not take them as we go. We'll take them all at the end. So that's sort of how we're going to operate that. Another just FYI, the next public meeting will be January the 21st here at the courthouse, beginning at 4 o'clock. So with that, it's all of your lucky day because I get the shortest part of this presentation. What we're going to talk about, typically when we canvass the county or we have meetings, we go into different communities or during an election or anything like that, the main questions, comments that come up as we go and what we try to focus on when we have things like this, obviously economic development, that seems to be the forefront of everybody's mind here. Broadband and broadband expansion, we get asked about quite frequently, and then things with the schools. I mean, those seem to be the big three, with budgets and taxes kind of being a fourth. And they're all sort of synergistically connected. So as you can see from the agenda, sort of how we're going to do this, we're going to have a little bit of an update for economic development and broadband. We'll get into the budget. And talk a little bit about what we budgeted for, where we're tracking, where we're trending, and then we'll get into some of the upcoming challenges that we foresee as we move along. I'll also mention, and I'll mention it again at the end, you know, a lot of this stuff's not going to be new with the exception of Kirwan, which is the big one, which we're going to talk about. And a lot of you in here have heard about it. Some of you, I'm quite sure, haven't heard about it, and hopefully you'll have some takeaways from that. Not a lot of new stuff. It seems we talk about the same stuff over and over and over again, and that will be the same. And as of right now, things, you want the state of the county in one word or two words, pretty good, especially comparing maybe to other communities in similar situations, similar circumstances to us. Although there are some significant challenges on the horizon, and that with the backdrop that we just had a very challenging budget cycle. And a lot of that's driven by population trends and so on and so forth. And the census is coming up. So it's very important that all of you in here who obviously care about the county, or you wouldn't be sitting here right now, it behooves us all to encourage your friends and neighbors to participate in the census, because that drives a lot of this stuff and a lot of funding and so on and so forth. Where's Scott? Let's begin. So we'll start out with an economic development update. And a big part of what we're doing with economic development is a lot of infrastructure. You can see the big projects we have either going on as we speak or upcoming. And there's a lot of excitement in some of this stuff. And again, some of this stuff, we talk about Kaiser's Ridge Business Park, that's been on the list for a decade now or longer, and things that we've been doing there. I will say we've had a lot of interest in Kaiser's Ridge Business Park, and I've said this before. A big part of the reason why we haven't been able to get Kaiser's Ridge moving forward is the lack of infrastructure. So if someone wants to build on the big pad in the back, there's no water there yet, there's no sewer there yet, so that poses a problem. So what we've been working on for the last several years, working with our federal and state partners, to be able to get that infrastructure in place. And the water storage tank is out for bid right now. Construction and completion set for 2020. So by the end of this calendar year, we hope that that park and the Kaiser's Ridge area will be completely serviced with water, which is a huge thing that's needed to have some growth there. Interestingly enough, I talked with Mike this morning. We've had some significant interest in Kaiser's Ridge. One big company is looking there right now, and one smaller company, but there is a lot of interest in that, and a lot of that's going to be driven whether we can pull those off, whether or not we have the water, sewer, et cetera, there to facilitate that. If you've driven by there recently, you'll notice there is some construction going on there. That is the wastewater treatment plant. It's under construction right now. Completion set for 2020. And the access road at Kaiser's Ridge Business Park. So you know there's a road that goes back through the whole park. What the access road is a spear off that to connect the other pads. So if someone wanted to come in there right now and take a parcel that's not on the main road, they would have to construct the road to get there, and obviously that's going to be cost prohibitive. But we are working with ARC. Local access road money is 100% money, so that'll be all funded by the feds. There'll be zero county dollars involved in that. We have been approved for that. We are in the design stage right now. Construction to begin in 2021. That will not preclude people that are interested in buying or building there because we do have pads along the main road. This would be deeper into the park. So that's what's going on with Kaiser's Ridge. And again, we have had some pretty serious interest in that, and we'll see how that moves forward. The Medco building in McHenry Business Park, we've talked about that. If you've driven out Bumblebee Road and you've been by there, you'll see some construction of a pretty significantly sized building out there. It's a shell building that Garrett County partnered with Medco and Commerce on to be able to build that building. The share for that, Garrett County's got a 25% cost share in that, so that's a just about a $3 million building that we're being able to get put out there for about $700,000 local share. Most importantly, at the McHenry, at that shell building, we do have a tenant already. So as soon as that's built, we will have someone in there in part of the building. The whole building, there'll still be some room to bring someone else in if someone's interested in coming in there. Construction's underway right now. It's on schedule for about a mid-March completion date, and we're working on a final agreement with the tenant as we speak. So that'll be a big addition, and it will help our local cheese-making company grow and further facilitate that industry here in the county. And it is exciting to already have a tenant for that building as soon as construction is complete. The Virtual Job Shadow Initiative is something that's just on the radio today. If you listen to Jim Schaefer on KHJ, shameless plug, Jim, you heard about the Virtual Job Shadow Initiative between the Board of Education, the Chamber of Commerce, and Economic Development. Basically what that does in a nutshell is help expose kids in the high school to careers that may not exist right here, and they can see what it's like, and they can follow people virtually and what they do for a day. Basically it's a virtual internship, and give exposure to kids to things that they may not be able to have right here in the here and now. Grantsville Workforce Housing and Springs Road Water and Sewer Project really is one project. That's being driven by ARC funds. It is in an opportunity zone on 669 in Grantsville, trying to capitalize on the growth of that area in 219 in particular. Partnered with the town of Grantsville to work on that project. Both of those projects are in the review and design stage right now. ARC funding has been approved for that, and there'll be more to come on that. It's an exciting project for workforce. What's the word I'm looking for? Market rate rentals. So it's not government subsidized, low income. It's truly market rate rentals, and the philosophy behind that project is if the government can come in and facilitate the infrastructure costs, water, sewer, stormwater management, et cetera, developers will be able to then come in and build buildings at a cheaper rate, which will be able to drive the rents down. We will be involved in that, and we'll have some control over that. We had a study done, the town of Grantsville had a study done to show what the market is for market rate rentals, and they know what the market can sustain, and that's sort of the target. So that's an exciting project. Try to capitalize on 68. We have the I-68 Regional Alliance which is basically Allegheny, Garrett County, Maryland, Mineral County, West Virginia, and Morgantown, in trying to work regionally through the Greater Cumberland Committee to see ways that we can work together to develop economically through our strength, collective strength. It's still somewhat in its infancy, and moving forward and that's being driven by Greater Cumberland Committee. We also have the airport expansion project. I don't know how many of you get out to the airport. I know some people don't even know we have an airport, but we do. And you know, the significance of that can't be understated. Economic development cannot happen without infrastructure. And infrastructure occurs in a lot of ways. It's internet, it's roads, it's water, it's sewer, it's stormwater management, and it's rail, and it's airports. I mean, that's the way the world works. We're fortunate to have one. Not every county does. And ours is actually performing very well. And we are evidenced by the expansion. We are adding some hangars out there and an apron to help facilitate the growth and expansion of that airport. The airport expansion project is just about $7 million, and we got about $346,000 in it. So it's a significant expansion for a relatively low investment on our part, which will give opportunity for growth in the county beyond just the airport itself. A lot of people that want to, you know, I know that Closet Made and some of the businesses in the Grantsville Industrial Park, and I'm sure in the Southern Industrial Park, their CEOs, their investors, they fly into the airport and go from there. So it's definitely a project that supports the greater need. 219 North, huge project. We talk about it all the time. It's under construction now. It looks like an airport if you drive by there. And it's going to be a tremendous boon to the northern end of the county and the county as a whole. 219 is a $61 million project, 0 county dollars invested in this. It's going to help with a lot of things, including tourism. It's going to open up markets to the Deep Creek Lake area that currently are probably not in play, such as Buffalo and maybe some other areas once that whole project is complete. We're actually actively working with our federal partners, and I'll give Congressman Trone a lot of credit on this. He's been very proactive in helping us and trying to work with our friends in Pennsylvania. We're actually coming in under budget, which is unheard of really anymore. And what we're trying to do is to work with our federal partners in the ARC system, that excess money in roads can be shared between states. Right now you can't do that. And Congressman Trone has been instrumental in that. Pennsylvania's on board with that. I think we're going to see some movement on that. And if that happens, I think you'll see that road completed to Myersdale in a lot shorter time frame than what it took to get us to where we are today. So very optimistic about that, and working with our partners there. The EOC, I've been talking about that for a long time, Emergency Operations Center. We hope to have a facility operational in 2020 and far under the anticipated budget. We're actually in negotiations right now to bring that to fruition, and fingers crossed, if there are no hiccups, we'll actually be in the EOC and operational under budget this calendar year. And finally, on the list of economic development projects and capital projects, the Performing Arts Center, the CPAC at the college, $16 million facility. The county's invested $3.7 million in that. We're the only county in the state without an EOC. That will be rectified this year. We're the only county in the state without a Performing Arts Center. That will be rectified as well. And that Performing Arts Center is a community performing arts center. It's not solely for the use of the college. And Dr. Midcap's here, Superintendent Baker's here. It's a GLAF, college, public school partnership, and it'll really enhance the cultural aspect of the county as well as the educational opportunities for our students. So all said and done, on that slide, you see $97.5 million investment in Garrett County. That Garrett County is going to invest 9% of, at about 9%, or about $8.9 million. If you take 219 out of it, because that is obviously skewing the numbers, it's $36.5 million that we're getting in Garrett County through our partnerships with the feds at the state and the taxpayers of Garrett County. And all of that much needed, and all of it will hopefully push us forward and help further develop our economy here in county. So to go along with that, you can read the slide. 65 business licenses issued in 2018. In 2019, we had 80. So we were able to increase that by 15. Certainly excited about that. Unemployment, you can look at the numbers. Garrett County right now trending from October year over year at the same 3.7 year to date. We're a little better than year to date 19 to 18, and anywhere roughly around 4% is full employment, basically. So we're doing pretty well there, and our hope is with the infrastructure we got going on, and we've got businesses in county that are currently here that are good businesses that want to expand, that do pay very good wages with benefits, and as we can further help them do that and maybe attract one or two more businesses the same, that not only will the low unemployment remain, but we'll be able to organically grow those wages and et cetera in the process. Local capital funding, we talk about economic development. I certainly would put the public schools in there. Local capital funding after fiscal year 17 for the public schools, $3.8 million. Most of that, about 95% of that money, has gone to Southern Middle and Southern High School. And that does not include the money in the capital budget that will go to the upgrade of the athletic facilities, which should begin later this school year into the summer. We did receive, as I'm sure a lot of people know, $1.5 million from the state. It's unmatched. It's $1.5 million. We're not committed to any money on that for the athletic facilities at Northern and Southern High School to upgrade those. Other things, a lot of money put into Southern Middle on the roof, which happened a couple years back. The fire alarm there was replaced, sewer line was replaced there, and some stuff at Southern High School. A lot of the same things, and we did just agree, in working with our partners at the Board of Ed, and some of those guys are here tonight, for a $1.6 million front facade renovation at Southern High School to keep the front of that building from falling off. So we were able to fund that as well, and try to continue to keep our schools in the best shape that we can in a capital sense moving forward. So moving on to broadband. So that's economic development. The takeaway there, I think everyone always says nothing's going on, nothing's happening. There's a lot happening. It just doesn't happen overnight. There's a whole lot of infrastructure stuff. And again, we've been talking about the Cottage Ridge water system and wastewater system for years and years and years. And it's finally now starting to come to fruition. And I think you'll see some growth happen because of that. 219 we've been talking about literally for 65 years now. It's going to be done. And I think you're going to see some growth there. We're trying to hit the housing piece. We hear all the time about affordable housing. We're trying to impact that. With a couple things. We mentioned the Grantsville thing on here. We also have a project here in Oakland we're working with Community Action on, similar kind of thing that we're trying to do there. And we're growing, we're increasing our business licenses year over year and maintaining our unemployment rate. So those are all good things. Broadband hopefully will help us. So right now we have an estimated 75% broadband coverage. Countywide. Now that means that about 75% of the people that live in Garrett County have access. That does not mean that 75% of the people are actually hooked on. We have 4 main providers, not counting Verizon, in the county that we work with collaboratively, that we try to help facilitate their growth and do some public-private partnerships with them. One of them is Comcast, and we work with them actually a lot in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years. And their footprint in Garrett County has grown exponentially because of our partnership with them. And you can see there 3 areas recently completed expansions. They're working on 9 right now, as well as getting the service installed at McHenry Business Park, which is integral for us to continue to grow that park. Once, now that we have a shell building going in there, some other interest in that park as well. Comcast has been active in the Appleton Lonaconing area, Sunset Ridge, Bumblebee Road. They're working right now sort of in the Benninger and in the middle of the county, Foxtown Road, as well as the airport, looking at Foy Road, Axon Friendsville Road, Oakland Sang Run, Benninger around 495, Mosser Road, and 42 in Friendsville. So those are some of the areas. Not saying that those people that live there are going to have internet tomorrow. It takes a long time to get this stuff done. There's legal stuff, there's physical stuff, there's all kinds of there's financial stuff. But just having it on the list is a big step forward in being able to bring that stuff to completion. We also work with QCall. Again, they're expanding. You can see 9 miles of new fiber in highly rural areas. And they've increased their upload-download speeds to those service areas. And you can't really say that 9 miles in highly rural areas might only be 2 houses or 3 houses, but they're not going to get it unless people like QCall run the fiber there. So. New Beam, get a lot of stuff with New Beam. They're a partner of ours. You can see right now they have 870 current customers. They have planned expansion into unserved areas to serve 2,000 more customers over the next, Nathaniel, how many years? Several. We'll go with that. So New Beam's footprint's really growing. And when we put this together, I mentioned, and you guys will understand this, Benninger is a great example of this. So Comcast is doing a lot of work in Benninger. New Beam's doing a lot of work in the Benninger area. So a lot of what will be new customers there, we can't count them twice. So we can't say we're going from A to B, because a lot of the customers that these companies are going to claim they can serve, who don't have anyone that can serve them now, might have 2 providers that could actually serve them a year or 2 from now. But the takeaway is, when you look at this, and we have one more, Chantel also is upgrading their service, and you can see what they're doing. More people will have access to internet, and more people will have access to better internet as the year progresses and as the next couple of years progress. And a lot of that has to do with our IT and County Roads Department, because what we have done is we've moved in and worked with our partners that you see on the screen, and anyone else that would come to us and want to do it. And we, in our right-of-ways, will dig the trench to put the conduit in that makes it financially feasible for these companies then to lay their fiber in that conduit. And we don't do it specifically for anybody. Anyone can put their put their fiber in our conduit, but we're taking that cost off. Otherwise, I'm not sure a lot of these people would ever see internet. And so a lot of thanks and praise go to our IT department for working on those deals, and County Roads for physically making that possible. And new opportunities that we're working on right now. Maryland Rural Broadband has a pilot out for broadband expansion grants that the county can work with private providers on to try to get that money. We have 3 projects that are going to be submitted. One is New Beam, one is with Comcast, and one is with QCall.
Two calls accurate. New name is accurate.
Comcast.
Comcast is not.
Procom.
Procom. Yeah, Procom, Comcast. It had a com in it. So Procom, we're actively submitting those. We are very confident we'll get at least one. We're hoping to get two. The likelihood of getting all three is pretty slim. But that would be on top of any of the other stuff that you saw on those slides. So I think you're seeing, even though a lot of the county does have access to internet, as we're moving forward and it's taking a long time to get some of our areas of our county connected, the rest of the world's advancing. So we're getting to step A where everyone else is at step B and C and D. So not only are we trying to expand the footprint of broadband, but we're trying to work with our providers to enhance what's there as well. And with that, I'll pass to my colleague that's almost as old as Deep Creek Lake, Jim Heimbull.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget. You got ahead of me here a little bit. First, I start off with some good news. That is, we're halfway through the budget year, and we're doing well. We're right on track. There are no big issues. There's no problems. There's no red flags. There's nothing we have to deal with right now. In the following slides, we're going to go into a little more detail about some of this. And specifically, I've had people ask me, where does the money come from? Where does the money go? Those kind of. So we're gonna have a series of charts here that kind of shows where the revenue comes from, what the expenditures are, and we're going to talk about some of the future challenges and the potential impact of those future challenges. So we'll start with the first one. This one shows where our revenue comes from, and I know it looks kind of busy up there on the upper left quadrant of that, but what I'd like you to get from this is that our biggest source of revenue is real estate property taxes. That's about 55% in income tax. Personal income tax. We'll talk a little bit later about the real property tax rate, but right now I'd just like to say it's obvious that we're heavily dependent on property taxes. We have the 5th highest property tax rate in the state right now. Actually, we're essentially tied for 4th. You'll see that when I show you the details later. Income tax, we're allowed to, the cap is 3.2%. We're at 2.65%. So we have a little bit of room to grow in income tax. The problem with the income tax is because of our income levels, even if we went to the max income tax that's allowed by the state, we'd only generate about another $1.4 million in revenue every year. So you'll see later on potentially what the impact of that would be. The other point I'd like to make out of those real property taxes, roughly about 60% of that comes from the Deep Creek Lake watershed. And that's important, and we'll talk a little more about that later too. Okay, where does the money go in terms of expenditures? The top 3 items you see there, education, the college, the public education, the library, college, public safety, which is the sheriff's office, emergency services, emergency management, and public works is essentially county roads. Those 3 combined take 76% of our budget. 76% of our expenditures go to those 3. Also, I'd like to point out that less than 8% go to general government. So it's not all to run county government as some people think. Upcoming challenges. Now, this is where we're doing this because we want you all to be aware of the things that we're faced with in terms of, because it means at some point there are going to have to be a lot of tough decisions made. Because as we go through this, you're going to see that we can't practically or possibly do everything that's being proposed right now. And we'll talk a little more about that in detail as we go through here. One of the things, probably the biggest challenge we face right now is something called the Kirwan Commission. And we're going to have a couple slides just on that because it's so important in terms of the impact that it could have on us. So what is Kirwan? I'm not going to read that whole thing to you, but essentially it's a commission, a group of 26 people that was put together by the state legislature to look at our public school system and how to improve it to make it, they use the term world class, but they want to bring it up to the standards that some other countries have, like Taiwan and Singapore and some of those kind of places. So it's called the Kirwan Commission. It's actually the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. It's called the Kirwan Commission because it's headed up by Dr. Britt Kirwan. He was the former president of the University of Maryland, president of Ohio State University, and chancellor of the University System of Maryland. He's a friend of Garrett County. He has a place, I'll give you the address, but maybe that's not a good idea. He has a place at Deep Creek Lake. Good guy, great guy. So what do they recommend? And again, I'm not going to read it all to you, but it's basically expanding pre-K to all 4-year-olds and some 3-year-olds. Increase standards for the teacher profession, including raising salaries. And I believe I read that they want the starting pay for a teacher to be $60,000 a year, and they want the average pay to be $90,000 a year. Now, that's significantly above where we are right now, because what do teachers start at here? 44. So it's a significant upgrade in terms of that. Also, they want to kind of revamp high schools to put more emphasis on preparing people for jobs right after school versus college. And we all, college isn't everybody. There were times back when, a long time ago, when Larry and I went to school, that they kind of pushed people to go to college. But I think what we've seen today is college is still important, don't get me wrong. Lifelong learning is a function of educational attainment and all that sort of thing. But you can make a very good living without going to college today if you get a certificate in a good field, plumber, electrician, whatever. They also want to provide more support to special education and more help to poor families. The last one is key to me, that in terms of creating accountability to make sure the money for education is well used. That would be key to this whole thing. In my opinion, just putting a lot more money into education doesn't mean you're going to get a better product. So that's something that's part of this whole program. Now, what will Kirwan cost? Statewide, they're looking at an increase of cost of $4 billion over 10 years. That'll be shared with local governments. Our cost of that, we're going to show you in a little more detail, is 12.5 million. It's 1.2 billion, 2 million a year additional for 10 consecutive years. We have a couple charts that'll show you that. We're confident that Kirwan is going to happen. We don't know exactly what it's going to be at this point. There's something that's proposed. My guess is that what's proposed, what comes out is not going to be what's currently proposed, because I'm our representative to the Maryland Association of Counties, and I can tell you that every county has taken a position that they can't afford to implement Kirwan the way it's proposed right now. And so, but there is going to be some version of Kirwan passed this year. There's a new Speaker of the House, and there's going to be a new President of the State Senate. And both have said this is going to be their top priority, that it's going to pass the legislature this year. They've been studying it for 3 years. They're determined that they're going to implement something during this legislative session. Now, I also read yesterday where the same people have said they're not going to increase sales tax, property tax, or income tax for this coming year. But as we go through this, you'll see. You can't come up with $4 billion without some increase in taxes. All right, let's start looking at that. I said earlier, our cost right now, the way it's proposed right now, we're being told that our share, that's $12.5 $5 million over 10 years. If we did that the way it's proposed right now, we would have to increase property tax by 24% or 25 cents. Now, we just raised property taxes by 6 cents. I have some charts later to show you what the impact of that would be and in terms of what it would do to us. Now, I should also point out that most of the charts you're going to see show what the impact would be on property tax. The assumption there, just for the purpose of illustrating the impact, we're only talking about the increase in property tax. There are admittedly other ways we could increase additional revenue. We could, as I said earlier, we could increase the income tax from 2.65 to 3.2%. There may be some fees we can increase or some other taxes, but for the purpose, just for the illustration of the potential financial impact, we're going to talk about property tax. I should also say that 24% increase does not include any funding for school construction projects. And we're going to have a chart here coming up that shows you the impact of all of these things. Okay, as part of preparation for this and to develop a strategy for this, we asked Scott in our finance department to take a look at projected revenue growth. What can we realistically expect in the way of revenue growth over the next 10 years? To do all these things, you have to make some planning assumptions. For example, it's probably hard for you to read there, but on real property tax,
And we know that's very difficult to read. That's why I said all of this will be online. You can go to the website. You'll be able to find all this stuff, all the charts online as well. So you'll be able to see it better there.
it's a pretty busy chart, but what we're going to ask you to focus on is that thing at the bottom where it says the total revenue growth over the next 10 years is about $5 million. We did make some planning assumptions here, and I'll give you an example that for real property tax, we made an assumption that it would increase by 0.75% a year. Now, there's some other nitty-gritty stuff there, like the amount of money that we get from windmills. They're depreciated over time, and so this projection also shows that loss in revenue that's associated with the wind turbines. But the bottom line is that based on the assumptions that we've made, over the next 10 years, we will accumulate an additional $5 million in revenue. Okay, now expenditures. There's two main sources that we're including here. We talked about the Kirwan Commission, and that creates an additional cost of $1.25 million a year. Year over year, so that's every year, up to a total of $12.5 million. The second line there is listed as debt service. This is assuming, and again, it's an assumption, that we would do we would fund all the capital costs that are associated with the Board of Education's facility study. Our share of that is $30 million. It would cost us $2.6 million a year for 15 years. For 15 years to pay that money back. The other thing we have here is we made an assumption that our operating costs will increase by about 1.5% a year. That's a pretty modest assumption, I think. So the key here is the one at the bottom where it says the total projected revenue growth over the next 10 years is $27.8 million. Remember, we had $5 million in new revenue. We have $27.8 million in new expenses over the same period of time. This chart, and again, it's a little hard to read, but it puts both of those up. It puts the projected revenue, the projected expenditures, what the balance is, what the impact of that is, and then it shows you what the tax increase would have to be to make up for that shortfall. And so, again, if you focus on the bottom line, the total projected tax increase over 10 years to fund the shortfall, we'd have to increase taxes about 46 cents. This is more of a visual graphic of the same thing we just talked about, where the green shows new revenue per year over 10 years. The red shows the expenses, new expenses by year over 10 years. And the blue line at the top shows you what the property tax rate would have to be to balance the budget, basically. So we've stuck this in there to try to help give people an impact of what that would mean. For example, if you had a $200,000 house and we did the things that are being proposed, then your additional annual tax would be $914. Where this really concerns me is when you go all the way down to the bottom, look at if you have $1 million house, you have $1 million lake house, you're currently paying $10,560 a year in real estate taxes. Under this new rate, you would pay $15,129. That'd be an increase of $4,569 a year in real estate taxes. If you live in Montgomery County and you own a $1 million house at the lake, right now you pay $10,500. If you own a $1 million home in Montgomery County where you live, you pay real estate taxes of $7,166. So the bottom line is, this could have, and remember, 60% of our real estate tax revenues come from the Deep Creek Lake watershed. So the bottom line is this, if we did everything that's proposed and raised the tax to the level we'd have to raise to support it, I would predict that we'd pretty much kill the Deep Creek Lake real estate market. People are not going to pay an additional $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 in real estate taxes. The rent would have to go up for the vacation homes. It's just, the other danger we have here then, people start selling their houses. When we go back, when the estate assessments office goes back and does the assessments, prices decline. They adjust the prices accordingly, the values, the assessments accordingly, and your real estate taxes go down. That's happened to us already. That happened beginning, was it 2008 and 9 when they started going down? So the impact on us, on Garrett County people is one thing. I mean, I don't think any of us want to pay more taxes. But it's bigger than just us when you start looking at the impact on our economy. This is what I was talking about earlier. This shows we have the 5th highest real estate property tax rate in the state. Actually, we're tied for 4th with Frederick County. They have 1.06. We have 1.056. So what that shows you is there isn't a whole lot more room for growth in terms of revenue from income tax or from real estate tax. So let me kind of, before I turn this over to Larry, let me kind of wrap up my portion of the presentation. Some people would say what we've presented is the worst case scenario. I'd say it's a conservative projection of what could happen. I don't know that it's the worst case scenario because we don't know what the economy is going to do. You know, we're in the midst of, I think it's been the longest economic expansion in the history of the country. We're in the 11th year or 12th year right now. That's not going to continue forever. We're pretty much at full employment right now. We don't know what's going to happen there. Minimum wage is going up to $15 an hour. We really don't know what the impact is, what that's going to do in terms of local businesses. But I think, again, for the purpose of illustrating the challenges we face with the budget, it's fair to make those assumptions. And what I've tried to show here is, and hopefully it's pretty obvious, that we just can't, there's no way we can afford to do all the things that are being asked of us to do. What we've talked about here doesn't include other things. I think we've allowed, Scott, what did we build into that budget? $2 million a year for capital? $2.5 million. And so, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. There could be, economic development's a good example. What if we got somebody that came into Kaiser's Ridge and it's a big business that pays well and it's going to create a lot of jobs and we have to build a building for them. You know, that's not built into this. Any big unexpected county capital projects aren't built into this. And you can't continue to neglect maintenance and repair, or over time, it's going to catch up with you, and you're going to end up with a bigger bill in the end. So I'm not trying to say it's all doom and gloom. I'm just saying that based on what we're seeing, we're going to have to make some really, really tough decisions in the future. And we probably won't know for a while until we see what form Kirwan has when it comes out of the legislature. But we know it's going to be expensive. We know it's going to cost us a lot of money. I didn't put a slide in here on demographics, but if I were to list another challenge, it would be demographics. We have a stagnant, aging population. We've had more deaths each year than births every year since 2008. So it's not that our young people, it's not just that our young people maybe aren't staying, it's that they're not here to begin with. And while our population is kind of stagnant between 29 and 30,000, when you start looking at it by age group, it jumps out at you that it's only stagnant because the number of people, old people like Larry and I, as Paul said, is increasing. The number of school-age people, school-age kids, is going down. So that's when we start looking at these things. That's another thing we have to look at. How are we going to have economic growth and business growth if we don't have people to work? So these are the things that we try to think about when we go through this process, and it's just going to be very challenging. I'm sure we can work our way through it, but we're going to have to all get together and cooperate and work together to be able to address these things that we have coming up.
Before Jim passes over to Larry, just a couple of comments on there. One, getting older is better than the alternative, but that's beside the point. When we look at that $4 billion number that the state's throwing out of what Kirwan's going to cost, one thing that people have looked at, and when we were at Mako, we had a lot of conversations with a lot of people that have analyzed this a lot more than we have. And some of the legislators are really banking on legalized gambling, if that passes, and legalized recreational marijuana as how they're going to fund their part of the equation. The numbers that Mako gave us was those two things combined, estimated revenue from legalized pot and legalized gambling is going to be somewhere around $750 million. So that's $750 million of $4 billion. Now, we've been told by one of our legislators, or a close by legislator, that another thing that's been floated at the legislative level by Maggie McIntosh, who also used to have a house here at Deep Creek, was to cut the sales tax to 5% from 6%, but to apply it to everything. So right now you buy groceries, a lot of groceries are tax exempt, a lot of services are tax exempt, so on and so forth. Under Ms. McIntosh's, now that bill hadn't been submitted yet, so that may get massaged, but what she's talking about in her pre-legislative stuff is dropping that sales tax to 5% and applying it across the board to every single transaction that you make, no matter if it's milk, bread, massages, whatever. And that is estimated to raise $1 billion, potentially. So if you take those three things together, if they did all those things, you're still more than $2 billion shy of what you need to fund this.
And we don't know we would get any of that.
And we don't know that we would get any of that. And the other thing is we're looking just at the impact on the county. On the backdrop of that, no matter what they said today, you all can do the math. At some point, the state is going to have to raise property, sales, or income tax, or a combination of the three. There's no way to get to $4 billion without doing it. So that would be on top of anything that the county does. So our residents that are here now, if we have to raise property and or income and or X tax, the state's going to be doing the same thing. Most of our money, when you look at the budget, comes from the tourism industry in some roundabout way. So if we continue to increase taxes, there is a regression point where people will divest in Garrett County, and Jim made that point. It's going to drive the assessments of the lake down and everywhere else. Now, some people might think that's great. I'll pay less in taxes, but it's going to crush our budget, and we're going to have to find that money somewhere else. So your reduction in assessment could lead to a higher tax because we have to find that money somewhere. The other thing we didn't mention is a lot of our money comes from accommodations tax. So as more people divest from the lake and you have less people vacationing here because the rental for a week just went up 25% or whatever, you have fewer people coming here, you have less accommodations tax coming in, you have less sales happening because no one's going to pay those prices for houses to pick up that, so you're getting less on the transfer tax, and you can see the impact on top of then also what's going on with the state. So none of this is happening in a vacuum, and it's a big picture, and that's why we need to have these conversations so that people understand the big picture. Because quite frankly, if I'd have told half my friends, hey, we might have to raise your taxes at $900 to fund these things, most of them be like, yeah, what's $900 a year? That's not a big deal. But the problem is, and they'll also say, well, let those guys at the lake pay. If you can afford $1 million house, you should be able to pay $5,000 more in taxes. Which the people that have the $1 million house are going to say, I don't need to do that, I'm going to go somewhere else. And as those 60% of all of our revenue from property tax doesn't come from my quarter-acre lot in Grantsville, it's coming from the quarter-acre lot at McHenry on the lake that's paying $3 million, or that cost $3 million. And when you drive those down, it impacts all of us. So we can't look at it like it's us against them, or it's only going to impact the rich or whatever. It really, when you look at how it all connects together, it's going to have a big impact on all of us, either directly or indirectly.
And we didn't mention it, but one of the other things that you would probably see is local people moving to West Virginia and Pennsylvania. Especially if you're older. Pennsylvania has no tax on retired pay. There'd be a lot of reasons to relocate. Let me add one qualifier too to what I said. We talked a lot about Kirwan, but that's because it's so big. We're not against spending on education. That's not. I don't want to create that perception out there that we don't want to fund schools and we're not for good public schools. We are. We just talked about Kirwan specifically because it's so big.
And again, Kirwan is a state initiative. And I know for some of you in here, you follow this stuff, you're well versed in Kirwan, and we're kind of beating a dead horse. But I just had one of our bigger business groups about a week ago. The board of directors called me and asked me what Kirwan was because they'd never heard of it before. So we know that a lot of people don't understand what it is, and it is going to be the driving, it's really going to be the crux of the whole state for the next couple of years. And it's very important that we understand that. The other thing that is sort of an aside to this is health insurance continues to grow. And that's impacting, I'm sure all the private enterprise people in here are seeing that. It's certainly going to impact us as well. It's already becoming more difficult, and I know that the public schools can attest to this, to attract and maintain employees. Especially when the private sector growth in wages is growing much faster than the public sector. I'm sure Dr. Midcap can understand that. So you're seeing people leave teaching jobs and county government jobs to go to the private sector. It's happening right here. We see it every day. Brian King can talk about that, I'm sure. And the healthcare costs keep going up, and at some point there's a breaking point that if we say, well, now we're going to, not only are we not giving you a pay raise, but we're also going to make you pay 35% more on your health insurance, you're going to see that become more and more difficult to maintain the services that we have right now. The other thing, and I said this last time we talked about the budget, the only way, we're at a point now, and you can see the amount of these numbers, the only way you're going to cut your way out of this eventuality is to cut whole departments. You cut the county roads department, we could probably cut 15% of our budget. But there's not one person in this county who wants that to happen, especially here. Now, maybe in Talbot County you get away with that a little bit, but you know, our guys do an excellent job. And even if you privatize that, you're not going to get the same amount of commitment that our county roads department puts into county roads. The same can be said for planning and whatever. There's some things you just can't cut them out. You have to have them. You're not going to cut the sheriff's department. The only thing Comar says we have to fund at all is the public schools. But you're not going to cut out the sheriff's department and the county roads department. You're just not going to do it. So we've got a real balancing act here of what to do, because we know something is coming. We don't know what yet. And the funny thing is, if you talk to 5 different counties and 5 different county boards of education, they'll give you 10 different numbers of what Kirwan's going to look like. Because the Department of Legislative Affairs put numbers out there that were different than Mako's numbers. They tried to talk about it, and according to Mike Sanderson with Mako, Department of Legislative Services agreed that Mako's numbers are probably closer to what they're really going to be, but nobody knows what they're going to be until something's passed. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty out there as we talk about all of this, but Jim's absolutely right. They've made no uncertainty that they will pass something. It's just a matter of what that's, and we had a lot of hope, and I'll end with this and pass to Larry. We had a lot of hope in this county that the Kirwan Commission would fix the wealth formula. And it did not fix the wealth formula. It did nothing for us in the wealth formula. As a matter of fact, it may end up actually hurting us a little more than we actually had been hurt before. And the wealth formula is on how the school's funded from the state and the county level. So we were hoping we'd get out. Right now, I think in the wealth formula, we're either 4th or 5th wealthiest county in the state, and we get the worst funding in the state for schools. So that didn't help us, because they're not putting more emphasis, which we hoped that they would, on income. It's staying primarily with property. So that's why it's not really shifting for us. So the hope, I know a lot of people, we had talked about that a lot, and what we heard at Mako was that's not going to happen. So, Larry?
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, if you all were timing when Paul said he was the shortest of this, I will be the shortest for 2 reasons.
That's a good job.
But the most important reason, I am fighting this cold, and the more I talk, the more I'm gonna cough, so I'm gonna try to keep this right to the point. Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about our school enrollment and the capacity that we have in our schools. And I'd like to say right up front that we have 3 of our school board members here. Appreciate you all coming out today. I hate it when somebody says, well, Larry said this and Larry said that, and you get it secondhand. So you're going to get it firsthand, exactly my feelings, nothing personal. And, you know, these numbers that are up here are facts. They're not fiction, they're facts. And the other thing I want to say about the school board is that they're going to have a lot of hard decisions to make because of Kirwan. It's being forced on them. It's not something they're doing, that they're making. It's not of their doing. It's the state's doing. So having said that, if you look at the percent of utilization in 2018, third row over, and go down to Southern Garrett High School, there was 715 students now in Southern High School. When I was in Southern High School, many years ago, Paul, but when I was in Southern High School, my graduating class was over 300 students. We had grades 7 through 12 at Southern High School at that time. So what that tells me, and if you look right beside of that, it tells you that Southern High School is at 49.3%. If you go up to Broadford Elementary, it says it's at 111% capacity. That's a little bit misleading because the, what do you call them, Paul, those add-ons? the portables that are out there are not taken into the square footage consideration there. So that's a little bit misleading, but still, when you look at all the schools there, 50, 60, 70% of capacity. So very few of those schools are at full capacity. So we're spending the same amount of money to keep them open as if they were at full capacity. So that's something that I think at some point in time soon, we're going to have to take a look at. Next slide. In 2007, we were funding $19,925,000. Now we're funding $27,738,000. That's over $600,000 each year average more that we're funding the school board. This chart shows you the downward spiral in population basically in the schools. In 2007, we had 4,567 students. 2019, it's 3,649. That's about 918 children less in our schools. We're spending in 2007 about $11,000 per student. Now we're spending over $15,000 per student. So, you know, I know a lot of people say, well, you don't spend enough on education, but we've increased the cost per student over $4,200 per student. And I've said this in the past and I'll say it again. I'm proud of all of our schools. I don't think there's a school in the state of Maryland that can compete with our high schools, our elementary schools, any of them. If you look at the robotics teams that we have, if you look at the sports teams that we have, we compete with anybody out there. And I'm also going to qualify that with this. I don't care how much you spend on a child. I don't care if you take the best school teacher out there and pay her 10 times what she's being paid now. If that child doesn't want to learn, or if that child's parent doesn't help that child learn, it's not going to learn. And I believe that. So it goes back to a lot of it to the parents, not to the teachers. Teachers are doing an excellent job. Now, I don't say they shouldn't have more money. I'm not saying that. But we have right now, with what we're putting out there, we have excellent education for our children. Excellent. And I'll battle anybody on that. The public schools is what we haven't talked about is the strategic facilities plan. If we would do all of these things, we're looking at over almost $31 million. You know, to look at that and to go back with what Jim has said, all the things that Jim has pointed out, the increased taxes and everything, that doesn't take in the local share of what we have to continue to upgrade our schools, to keep them running, keep them safe. There's nothing in that budget, nothing in what we've talked about that includes that in it. And to do that, that just means more taxes. And ladies and gentlemen, Garrett County can't afford more taxes. The people of Garrett County can't afford more taxes. So here's something I'll put out, and I know Paul and Jim doesn't know I'm going to say this. Mark Stutzman sits right here in the front row. Mark, you were very vocal when we tried to get fracking in the county, and that's over and done with. That's it. But you led a very good organization there to get fracking banned in Garrett, in Maryland. Help us get an organization formed that'll help us fight this. We need that help. These three commissioners here, we can't do it. You people here in the audience can't do it. But as a group, maybe we can get something done. Maybe we can let the people downstate, as you did in the past, as your group did in the past. Maybe we can make them see that if we continue to raise taxes in Garrett County, as Paul and Jim have said, people are going to leave Garrett County. It's not that far, West Virginia and Pennsylvania. It's not that far from Grantsville up into Pennsylvania to move that industrial park up there. And if we kill them with taxes, that's exactly what's going to happen. And when that happens, Scott back there is going to be looking at his budget saying, okay, I had 50 million coming in, now I got 25. So this is where we're at. This is what we're facing. I'm challenging the school board to look at maybe closing some schools. I don't say I want that to happen, but I'm telling you, there comes a point when you get down to 49% of capacity. Do we close that school, or do we move some kids up from another school up to Southern High School? What do we do? I'm not saying that's what we do. I'm saying, what do we do? What can we do? And what can we do to help Garrett County save money? So that's my speech. Thank you all for your attendance. Any questions?
Well, I'd just like to say the chart Larry showed on the capacity utilization, overall it's at 63%, which I think what he said was that we can't continue to maintain facilities that aren't being fully utilized. And I've heard people say, well, the answer is we need more economic development. Well, that is not going to work. I can give you an example. From 2000 to 2010, the county businesses created 3,000 new jobs. State data. We increased the workforce, number of people working by 17%. School enrollment declined during that period of time. So there is no silver bullet out there that's going to fix this for us. Closet Maid came in, they employ, I don't know, is it 300 people now or something like that? I don't think I can't recall one person that moved here when Closet Maid came in. The manager commuted from somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think, for a while. So economic development is not going to fix this for us. If you follow demographics, pretty much every rural county has the same problem that we have in terms of people and the aging population. The Maryland Department of Planning projects that by the year 2040, we're going to have 650 fewer school-age kids in Garrett County. Now, 2040 seems like a long ways off, but it's really not when you're planning. So, and I don't think our purpose here is not to pick on the Board of Education. It's to help people understand the situation that the Board of Education is in, and that they're going to have to make some really tough decisions, and people are going to be unhappy. So I think I really like Larry's idea of let's get a group of people together to look at different options. What are the options? But things in terms of our demographics, population, things are not going to get better. And I'm not, when I say that, people accuse me of being pessimistic and not seeing a bright future for the county and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying we shouldn't continue to try to do things to grow the population. I'm just saying that for planning purposes and for financing, the chances are that we're just not gonna see a lot of significant growth. And you know what? If I'm wrong and we did have growth 10 or 15 years from now, that'd be a great problem to have, and it would be pretty easy to go come up with the money to go build a school or expand a school or whatever, so.
Well, and I'll conclude, and then we'll go to question and comments. Hopefully the takeaway, oftentimes we isolate every problem into one silo, and then we can solve any problem when it sits in a silo. The problem is all this stuff synergistically connected together. So if we put $1 million, we could serve every single person in this county with high-speed broadband in a week, or at least fund it in a week. But what are we going to defund to do that? And where are you going to find that money? So you can't have, we keep talking about trying to grow the population of the county. It's not going to happen without good internet. You're going to have to put some money into that, which we're doing, which we tried to illustrate. And then you're going to have jobs for people to move to take, and then you're going to have affordable housing. Even if you have the best internet in the world, if you don't have affordable housing, they're not going to move here to take advantage of it or go to the school or anything else. So you got to have schools, you got to have water, you got to have sewer, you got to have internet, you got to have all those things, and all that stuff costs money. And that's why we're in a situation where we have to have these conversations. And people for years, before I was ever commissioner, and then even after I started being commissioner, there's no transparency. There's no this. There's no that. We're as transparent as we can be. There's a financial problem. And it's not caused by the school board by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not caused by any one individual or any one entity. It's a culmination of things from the federal and state governments on down to us. And a lot of them, these same. I bet 25 years ago you could sit in here even when money was pretty good, and you'd hear people talking about we need water expansion, we need sewer expansion, we need affordable housing, we need more kids in the school, we need this and that. If things happen, 25 years from now, we'll probably be having the same conversations. We're fortunate enough right now, and the primacy recency effect from my psychology days, when you leave, all you're going to remember is Kirwan's going to kill us. But if you remember the beginning of the presentation, we got a lot of good stuff going on. We're expanding the airport. We got 219 coming in. We're expanding affordable housing opportunities in both ends of the county. We've got new businesses coming in. We didn't touch on a lot of the businesses that are here that are looking to expand. The unemployment's low. In the educational attainment here, the public schools are killing it in a good way. They're awesome, and I know I'm a little biased in that, but I'll say that to anybody. So for all of the bad things, there's a lot of good. And would you rather be here dealing with these challenges than some of the other communities? And not to disparage anybody by name, but there's a lot of counties that are very close to us that have a whole lot of more complex financial problems than we do. We've got great services here. We've got a great roads department. We've got a great IT department. We've got a great utilities department. We've got a great economic development department. We've got great schools. We've got a lot of advantages. Now we need to work together and figure out how. Kirwan's not a creation of the county government or the county school board. And to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, there's a lot of good stuff in Kirwan. But it's going to cost a lot of money. And legalized pot and gambling isn't going to get us there. May help. Regardless of your thoughts on those, it may help, but it's not the $4 billion answer. So knowing that we're not just looking at the impact locally, there's going to be a state component of this too, and who knows what will happen at the federal level with income taxes or anything else as time marches on and regimes change and all, I guess, presidents change and everything else changes. Who knows? Well, hopefully we don't have a regime change. But there's a lot of uncertainty there that it's not just looking specifically at Garrett County. And to that end, and to try to make sure people do understand what we're facing as a county, we've talked a lot about this, and we had this meeting today, and there's, I don't know, maybe 35 people in here, a lot of the same faces we see every single meeting we have. There's still a lot of people in this county that don't have any idea what Kirwan is, what the impact's going to be. There's a lot of people in this county that don't even know we have an airport. Not to make fun of it, I had a guy the other day, a northern high school teacher, that drove down the road to go to Mountain Ridge to a basketball game because he coaches basketball and wanted to know what was going on at Hilltop. And it's 219 being built. They didn't even know that was going in, and that's a significant impact on the county. So to that end, we are going to, starting in February, and we'll have all the information out there, we're going to take some of this information out to the northern end of the county, southern end of the county, the center of the county, and we're going to gear it a little bit towards specific groups like the farmers and the Chamber of Commerce and the business associations and all those groups, and have different have basically the same presentation but in different parts of the county, to try to have some of these conversations and solicit conversation and ideas. And you know, we tried to do this when we looked at the taxes the last time. I'm fairly confident and hopeful, and I can't sit here and make any predictions or guarantees, but I don't think we're going to have to raise taxes next year. From what I'm reading and seeing, I think we're going to be good for a year or two. But 3 years out, 4 years out, you guys can see the numbers and we can do the math. And like I said, we're not cutting the roads department. So we're going to have to look at ways to generate revenue. And I'm sure, you know, there's 29, almost 30,000 people in the county. There'll be 30,000 ideas. But we need to share those and talk about it and try to work together to come up with solutions. But having said that, the main point of that is we are going to be hosting some community meetings over the next month or two. All that information will be out there. All the information that was presented today is online, so you can go check that out. And at this point, we'll take questions. When we do have a question, when we call on you, because we do have a big crowd, and this is being taped for to see later. If you would stand, you don't have to come up front, just stand up where you are, say your name and state your question, and try to state it loud because we're going to try to pick it up. So yes, sir, here first.
Hi, I'm Jerry Polius. I live here in Oakland. Trying to save your questions for last. That was a long presentation to try to remember. I could say this, you started out talking about the watersheds and so forth, all the things that we're going to try to bring more money, more jobs here. And everything said after that still actually relies on that. So it's kind of come up with a question. I would like to address one thing for the Board of Education. You were talking about trade schools or trades being taught in the schools. In 1950s, in high school, and yes, I was there, that program was already in effect. The big difference, I think now from then, was back in the 50s in Baltimore City, every other week there was a new gas station being built and it had a garage in it, so you needed a mechanic. Every time you turn around, there's another community being built. You need carpenters, you need these things. Even if you have a successful trade program in your school, the problem is, where do they go? Are they still going to leave the county? So you haven't fixed that problem of them leaving the county. That's one of the things I wanted to say. And because there's other people want to talk, I got one more thing, and that is, we keep looking at these taxes that you're talking about as some demon somewhere. Since I was little, we've been paying taxes, no questions asked. It's whether or not it's favorable, not whether people have to pay them. If you raise the taxes, they gotta pay it. This isn't a choice. So you're being very nice in trying to suggest some other way, but there isn't any. It's how much, and that's what you guys have to do, is try to keep it to a minimum, because you're right, it's gonna go up. Nothing we can do about it. Thank you.
Pat. I'm Patrick Hunt from Friendsville. I just had a couple of technical questions. You gave us the unemployment rates, but do you have labor force participation rates or average hourly wages to paint a fuller picture of what's going on here in the county?
I can get, well, I don't have it right here with me at this.
Economic Development has that information.
Yeah, we have that. We'll get it to you.
Good. And then on the broadband, those areas are listed up there. Are there maps? You said, like, for instance, I'm very curious about things on 42.
Yeah.
Is there a map up there of where that stuff's being done?
You have the build outs of that and
For the Comcast areas, we do. I don't know if we're allowed to share them. I don't know if they can share that confidential or not. I can find out.
Is Comcast on 42?
Comcast
Being
has recently
active?
they've recently built out, up 42.
Up 42, how far up?
I think all the way, although I think they're using it as some backhaul, so I think they're going to compete in that area.
Cool. And then I have a comment. I come to too many of these meetings, I feel sometimes. But I would point out that when I heard you in Friendsville several months ago, you talked about all the problems of education. It was before the Kirwan report. And so I just wouldn't run that out as too much of a straw dog. There's problems here with or without those, the implications of that legislation. And we really like our school in Friendsville.
Kim.
I'm Kim from Friendsville, and I think, man, I'm like exploding with ideas, and I'll just kind of round in one. The dwindling population and the reliance of tourists to help pay for things is real, and when I talk to people my age that leave the county, a lot of the reason is they can't get paid very well and find good jobs. There's a lack of diversity in culture and therefore thoughts and ideas. And I didn't hear anything about addressing climate change from you guys. And that's a really important thing for young people. And trying to raise a child with awareness of climate and what we can do as a people, as a community to address that. And just on climate change, we're going to see a lot more climate refugees. And that might be from the Eastern Shore. DC is built on a swamp. We're gonna see migrations of people. But I also think, to touch on diversity again, we might want to open our hearts to climate refugees from other countries, maybe asylum seekers, which is scary for not only them, but for us. And if we could help integrate in some way and work as a community to figure out what that means, if we're okay with that. I think refugees have a lot of a lot more belief in the American dream than many of us do, and might be more willing and active in helping bring more economic growth. But that might just be, my projection onto that situation. But anywho, that's what I wanted to drive in. And also, I agree with Pat. Friendsville Elementary School is really beautiful, and I've worked with all those kids, and the principal there is amazing. So I agree.
Thank you.
Frank. Hi, Frank Chapman, Lake Park. Quick technical question. Did I hear correctly, the Kirwan impact is 12.5 million over 10 years for Garrett County?
It's projection as of now.
Out of the $4 billion that the program is going to cost for the state to be raised elsewhere in the
Yeah,
state?
$4 billion cost is the statewide cost projection currently, yes.
Were we treated fairly in the allocation of that? Did we come out even, or did we have another wealth imbalance or issue, or was pretty much uniform across the state?
I think every jurisdiction will tell you they're getting the short end of the stick, even the ones that are getting it great. Jim made an excellent point, and to put this in perspective, and for those of you that have the misfortune of hearing me talk about this several times, Kirwan, as it's proposed right now, is going to cost Montgomery County about $800 million. Is that right? $800 million additional dollars than they're paying right now. It's going to cost Baltimore County like $300 or $400 million. The city's going to have several $100 million. Because of that, it's probably not going to pass the way that it is right now, because those 3 jurisdictions with Prince George's have all the votes. So they're not going to vote to tax themselves into oblivion. Although they will vote to tax us into oblivion. You're right. And my personal thought is anything that helps them, unless the state is going to pick up more of the tab, which they may, depending on what happens, but any change to the formula that's going to benefit the biggies are going to hurt the little guys. I can say we did not benefit in any way in the change of what's going on with the Kirwan funding. It didn't help us in this whole wealth formula change everybody's looking for. We didn't get that. And we're not going to get it, although there is an outside chance, to be fair, and we're working on this, which would help us more than the wealth formula on the operation side. If we can get the construction formula changed, that would be a tremendous benefit to Garrett. It'd be a huge benefit to us. You know, it's one thing to absorb $400,000 in operations cost and maintenance effort year over year, and we've done that. It's a whole other thing to come up with $35 million to renovate a school in one swoop. So if we could get the funding formula on construction changed, which I think there's a slim chance to do, and that's going to come up in this session as well, that might help us. But long answer to your question, the short answer is no, the funding formula did not benefit us in any of the changes in Kirwan.
And one other point, to Larry's point, first, thank you for that comment and that suggestion. I agree this is not your 3 guys' total responsibility. You're steering the ship. There's got to be a lot of other sailors helping propel the ship. And it's up. I think most of the people in this room, you know, I've seen a number of you before, and I've been here a number of times before, would be active to get involved in some effort to determine how do we face this crisis. Because Jim, as you expressed it, in 10 years we could have a dramatically different finance economic portfolio than we have now in a number of ways. It's not going to be pretty to look at the numbers as you described. The only ones that can really get our arms around it and fix it is us. Now, it's going to take resources, it's going to take money, it's going to take political leverage, it's going to take creative thinking, like Kimby just said. I mean, we may have to embrace things that are uncomfortable for some of us going forward, in terms of who we live next to, how we recruit new neighbors, how we educate our kids, how we pay for things. But if we don't address those, how we promote energy and how we deal with, we banned fracking. I know that was a very divisive topic, but I do think we have some things in sustainable energy that we could promote and brand Garrett County as a leader in this form of energy that is attractive to the Kimbeys and others in the population. So we need a lot of creativity and need a lot of help. And thank you for explaining this so explicitly. It's a difficult topic, but you guys did a great job.
You know, I think the biggest thing, having said that, is that, like Paul said, we're one small senator up here against how many down in 3 counties that, you know, so we have not a lot to say. And, you know, what it would take to change their minds probably is if this comes out unfavorable to them, then it may help us some. That would probably be the only way.
Annie?
Thank you, Paul. Annie Bristow, and I'm from a town, I don't know what to call it, 2 miles off of the interstate. The Fenzel likes it. Fenzel, but not really. Altamont County, I guess. I want to amplify something that Kim said, and I think we're entering a period of great uncertainty. So maybe going to war, maybe without thinking about that, but in terms of climate. And things are happening so, they're exponentially faster. I just heard a report from the Upper Potomac Riverkeeper from the DNR folks are saying they've seen a precipitous decline in almost all fish populations, except for the brookies out here, in areas of the state because of these deluges we're getting. It's flushing out all the eggs. And they can't keep, spawn forever. So we're losing those little fishes. That's just in 2 years. I just looked at a map of the change in growing season out here. over the last 10-year period. We have 30 to 45 more growing days. This was forestry data. Things are changing rapidly. Some of those will be to our advantage, or we will be able to seize advantages in them, and others will not be. But I would like to the recency effect, and on a positive note, that we still have relatively pristine watersheds. Even our watershed that originates in West Virginia, as far as I know, there's not fracking impacts where the Yock starts. We have really healthy headwater streams in terms of any industrial effects on them, but also ag practices. We don't see some of the worst ag practices. We don't have the huge factory farms out here and all that runoff. Our resorts and our rental space may become more popular because it'll be hot as hell in DC and swampy, and they're already having horrible mosquito problems. They're going to be spraying toxins all over the place to kill them. People used to come out here, right, from Pittsburgh and other areas because of the air quality and because they could get away from that oppressiveness. Those kinds of things might be happening for us. So the more that we can do to be sure that we protect our watersheds, our healthy soils, we have amazing healthy soil initiatives out here. A lot of young farmers who are in the area, either leasing land or trying to buy land and engage in those practices. And there are opportunities. So I think we could be a model for doing things that could attract United States refugees, as well as from our climate refugees, as well as from other areas. I know personally people leaving West Virginia and Pennsylvania because of fracking. So there may be people, as that pressure gets worse, who will find their area more attractive, as opposed to leaving, yeah, we're gonna have to have some affordable housing to deal with it. But I think we have some exciting opportunities, and us old folks, I am just as worried about, and obsessed actually, about what's happening with climate as young people. I think there are a lot of us who would like to live out here in a relatively healthy environment, and those of us who were fortunate enough to have good educations and a family that supported that for me, and I have income resources, so I have really good health insurance. You get a lot of old folks like us out here with good health insurance to support our hospitals, so we don't have rural hospitals that are closing, the excellent healthcare systems, we're networked with the universities. I think we have a lot going for us out here. So.
Thank you. Ken. Kenny Braitman. I'll make it quick. Compared to Paul's talk. I'm not local, but I moved here in '71, so I'm lived here longer than most who don't call me local. But what I've noticed is that when I feed my birds, I used to go through 50 pounds of bird seed every other week. Now it lasts forever. I don't have birds. The fish are gone or disappearing. My farming practices are changing because the land's a lot wetter and it takes me longer to get my tractor out there. Nothing's the same. When I listen to all the projections that are made, a lot of the presumptions is unchanged. The population remains the same, all these things. If I were doing the planning, I don't know what presumptions I'd make, and I'm not being critical of the planning process. But I think the future is so uncertain that it makes planning incredibly difficult. And I want to follow up and just direct a thought, which is everything I've heard I agree with, but we have, as this gentleman in the back said, a resourceful population, and we can all work together. And everyone has expertise and ideas in lots of various areas. Kim's idea of bringing in refugees, tied into a program I heard on NPR. I know most people out here don't listen to that, but I do. And it was about bringing in refugees for farming because that's their whole life and that's all they know. And they build soil and they bring in restaurants for their Ethiopian cooking or whatever. There's a lot of great thoughts. So if we pull together with out of the box thinking, with new ideas and different ideas, I think I'm more hopeful than incremental thinking. And my suggestion is, Paul, or all the commissioners, I apologize, is that you call an open meeting for people with ideas. And, you know, see who comes. We need someone to just get the ball going. That's all I'm saying. And whether it's Mark, EMM organization or whatever, we need someone to just start. And then people will follow, and that's my suggestion, whether it's you or Mark. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsley Williams, and I'm comparatively a newcomer. I've had a home and property here for over 30 years, and I did something 2 years ago which changed things significantly for me, which is I actually closed and sold my home in Washington, D.C. that I shuttled back and forth because I was basically had 2 lawns to mow. I didn't need that. That's just a little fact about me, and I'm now a resident here. I voted here. One of you got my votes. You know, it is by district, so I couldn't support all 3 of you, but what I hear today is something that is I think, critically important, and that's why you have a room full. And I'm hoping to look at the website, and I'm hoping I will find your various words that you are perhaps reading from something you prepared in advance, I don't know, but looking at charts such as we had without the accompanying remarks is going to give us less of a picture. Now, what I also heard was that there's this thing coming down at us called Kirwan. And I don't know enough about Kirwan to say anything wise, but I will ask that we get some discussion about whether Kirwan's costs are being developed on a per facility basis or whether they're tied to the enrollment that's actually in the place where it's, because I see numbers of, one of you said our student enrollment is dwindling, not plunging, but going down. So if it's done on a per student basis, Kirwan numbers, then those costs could be worse if it were per facility. But if it's done on a facility, you have to have air conditioning or heating. I don't know what it's saying, but that seems to me to be something that should be fundamentally questioned as the legislation goes forward. But there's another danger here, and that is the legislature seems, or you reported as, they're determined to do something. Well, if Montgomery County and Baltimore County and PG County are all going to be gored by the numbers as you reported, and something's going to have to give, well, there's only one place where the giving can be done, and it's from the places that don't know what they're about to be gored with. And so I guess I'm feeling like there's a relationship that has to be explored between the places that are going to really get gored from the places that are going to suffer from the consequences of a last-minute deal that somehow solves the problem for the big guys and makes the problems for the little guys even worse. That's what I heard this afternoon. I'm delighted to know that you're going to have meetings up and down the county, and I think that it's a subject that will be of great interest as well to a certain organization up in the lake, or several of them, because, as you said, a lot of the resources that you're getting out of real estate taxes, and probably sales taxes as well, comes out of that pocket. And your projections, to me, make me feel like I should be looking elsewhere for the next few years that I have left on this planet. But I think this was a good session, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, Mark Stutzman, I'm a resident of Mountain Lake Park, and Larry, I just wanted to thank you for what you said, because I feel that any really grand solution, we've got some pretty big problems to face, we've also got great things going on, but I think big solutions come not from individuals, but from people that work together. And as you know, at Engage Mountain, Maryland, the word engage is in it for a reason, because we ask that people do engage in what's happening both on a political level and in their local lives. I noticed that Kenny pointed this out, and Lindsay pointed out how long they live here. And for some reason, people think that based on how long they live here, it qualifies how much they care about the county, which I don't think is true. People move here deliberately because they love living here. So each of the people in this room are advocates for the county. So what I would ask is basically what you're saying too, is that everybody that is in this room and everybody that you know potentially will help this county grow. So if you run into somebody who's a business owner and you say, have you ever considered moving your business to Garrett County? That's what we need, because our problem all boils down to population. We don't have enough people to take care of the amount of land that Garrett County has. We are the largest county. So yet we have one of the smallest populations. So you look at a place like Montgomery County that's packed to the gills, they've got so much income coming in that they can afford to do the things that help them continue to thrive. So I think the problem is that Garrett County needs more people, but at the same time, I think there's an undertone of apprehension of outsiders coming here because outsiders want to do things differently. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. They might want to do things better. And we figured out the best we can how to make things work, and you guys are doing a good job, and I thought this presentation was excellent in a great overview, but we do need more people. So I think as a county, we have to start looking at how do we bring those people in with their businesses, with their families, with their children, so we can start to populate the county. We can't procreate at a rate fast enough to solve our problems.
I am trying.
I know you are. You're doing your part.
Thanks.
But anyway, I just want to thank you, Larry, because I think you really touched on a potential solution that involves everybody. And if everybody's behind it, everybody's invested. And I think we can see some results.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Just Nicole Christian, President of the Garrett County Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for the information tonight. The Chamber has been working on Kirwan diligently for the past 6 months, following the information, putting it out there continually to our members. And I know that even some of those 600, well, we have over 1,000 on our mailing list. I bet you people aren't reading the information. And so the only thing I would mention is that it is incumbent upon you to read the information that is being put out there. And as Larry was stressing before, we have an uphill battle because we do only have one senator and we have one delegate. Now, part of the Western Maryland delegation, that does help us out, but you do have an opportunity to go to Annapolis. Mark, when you led the anti-fracking coalition and took them there, that was fantastic. But I will tell you that you can go to Annapolis on your own at any time. You can call legislators on your own at any time, and you can actually testify in front of the committees. It is going to be so important that Garrett County has a very loud voice when Kirwan is being discussed at those committees. And we'll be putting the information out there through our email list and on all of our social media about when the committee hearings are. But you have an opportunity coming up in the next couple of weeks in the form of Mountain Maryland PACE. Who's been to PACE? How many? Okay, so for those of you who have been, help mentor or help counsel the rest of the people in the room and get other people to go. It's January 23rd and 24th. And we'll have a huge reception sponsored by both Allegheny and Garrett counties. And we invite all the legislators, all the decision makers in Annapolis. And it is a great time to go and talk to them about what we need and how the way Kirwan is set up now, our county, it's not feasible for us to come up with an additional $12.5 to $13 million over the next 10 years. And that would continue to multiply, by the way, after 10 years. So you have to go and talk to them, but we're gonna have to all work together as a county and be loud. You can register on the PACE website at mtmarylandpace.org. There's still time to get tickets, but if we don't all come together and work together on Kirwan, believe me, Montgomery County, Prince George's, everywhere else is going to be plenty loud, and we're going to have to be just as loud. Just like when the anti-fracking coalition led their groups, they were very loud, and that's what gets attention. I did want to just mention one other thing on all of the economic development stuff. There's a lot of growth and development going on here, and I think sometimes I heard a couple people say tonight, oh, there are no good jobs. Our employers are just languishing because they don't have enough workers, and there are good jobs. And for those of you that think jobs in the tourism industry aren't good, that's incredibly wrong. People make very good livings. They get health insurance, they get other benefits working in the tourism jobs. And if you don't believe me, I'd be happy to have you talk to some of those business owners, and they can share with you what they're offering, and yet they still can't get enough workers. So even if we brought in a business that was going to employ 200 people, we wouldn't have the people right now to fill those jobs or the housing for them. So I thank you for everything that we're doing in the way of economic development. I see the growth and development every day, and look forward to continue to work with you on that too. So thank you.
Reminded me that we actually share our senator with 2 other counties.
We have a third of a senator and a half a delegate.
Montgomery County has 8 of them, I think.
We're only 30,000 people now. It's not a fact that we can change or remote, right? I mean, that we have to find a way to work and find balance. Saying it's all Montgomery County's fault is not going to solve the problem.
I don't think anybody's blaming Montgomery County. I think we're saying they have the votes, and what they want to do is, and they're going to look out for their self-interest. I don't blame them for that at all. Don't misunderstand.
But we can be vocal, and people will listen. Montgomery County wasn't going to have any fracking there. What dog did they have in the fight? But the group got them to listen.
I want to go here first, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I think you commissioners did an excellent job with your presentation. However, I would like to ask a question. Have you discussed with Senator Edwards or Delegate Weitzel anything in regards to this Kirwan program, what's being proposed? And what is their stand on it? I haven't read anything in the paper about what they actually think about it, whether they're for or against it. Another thing I'd like to say for you, I expect an answer is, Larry, I agree with you. I've always been a firm believer in the powers of numbers. I feel as though that we do need to make a stand, but before we make any kind of a stand in Annapolis or however we go about doing this, I think we need a leader, and those leaders certainly, I would think, would be our senator and our delegate. I believe we need to have discussion with them to find out exactly how we do approach this. You know, I just have the feeling here, I don't know what questions to ask. I don't think half the people here knows what questions to ask. So we do need some guidance, and I think the idea of future meetings is an excellent idea. And I don't want to see the same mistakes that I've seen made in my lifetime and with the Board of Education throughout the years. I can remember back, and I know Mr. Heimbach can, he and I graduated from high school together. But I think he might be a day or two older than I am.
He probably is.
But,
I was held back in the first grade.
well, you've done well since then. But anyway, let us start to say, I'd like for us to have, I think we do need to have more meetings. But getting back to the mistakes that's been made, I can remember back, and Larry and Jim, I know you guys can. Back when we were told in Garrett County that we needed more schools. And that was the cry. Oh yeah, we need more schools. The projection was a big population boom that never happened, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But anyway, it didn't happen. I feel as though that's part of the problem today. That's what the Board of Education is being faced with. That's what you commissioners is being faced with, was mistakes made years ago, okay? Recent mistake, I attended a meeting when Dennett Road was being discussed, and it was proposed that that school was not fit to house students, okay? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it was a lie. As far as the majority of citizens in Garrett County that I've talked to considered it to be a lie. Now, we got to be smarter this time. We can't be lying to each other. We have to do this in a combined effort. My opinion would be, from what I've heard, just off the top of my head now, this Kirwan idea should be shot down. Apparently, other counties throughout the state are having the same problems probably you guys are. And I think there has to be some more serious discussion about this before it's ever passed. Thank you.
Well, I'll address, I appreciate the comments, thank you, and I'll say, we've had lengthy conversations with the senator, the delegate, and others. I'm not going to speak for them. I think it's not quite as simple as to say, do you support Kirwan or not support Kirwan, because there's a lot of stuff in Kirwan that I think the vast majority of people probably would support. I think really the part that gets everybody's attention is the extreme amount of cost. And then it's a return on investment. Is the cost and what we're getting, and is there a way to whittle the cost down and still get some of the effects? So I don't think it's either you support it or you don't. And I think the senator and the delegate would both answer it that way, although I'm not going to speak for them. I think they're as concerned as we are, and probably most people in the room are, with what the total cost to us directly is going to be. And that, I think, is the concern that, quite frankly, in my conversations with people all over the state, no matter if they're Democrat, Republican, urban, or rural, they all share the same concern. How much is this going to cost me personally? And I think because of that, the legislature has said they are going to pass something. I believe they will. But I think it's going to look a lot different than what it looks like today, because so many people share the concern of how is this going to impact me directly, that you'll see some changes to it.
Well, has the Board of Education had any discussion with the senator or they have been addressed too by that? Okay.
Yeah, and I met with the senator and delegate with the president of the Board of Education, Matt Paul, a while back. I'd say maybe 3 months ago, and they're back to what I said previously. They think our best hope, and I agree with them, is to work on the construction side of the financing. And there might be a sliver of hope we can change something there. That's external to Kirwan, because Kirwan doesn't really touch the construction piece so much. But that would be one area where I know they're focused on, where they see an opportunity maybe to get some meaningful change for us. But we have had a lot of conversation with them. I know the board has, I know the superintendent has.
Do you feel it'd be beneficial if we would have another meeting and they would attend, that they could hear the public's or at least, address the public's questions.
I think they would be very open to that. And again, not to speak for them, in the next month or two, it might be difficult because they're in Annapolis all the time, but post, I think they would be very open to having a conversation about that. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Director Schweitzer.
Director Schweitzer, excuse me. My name's Allison Schweitzer. I've lived here my whole life, except for the 4 years that I went away to college. And I'm the Director of Finance for Garrett County Public Schools, and I have lived and breathed and eaten Kirwan for the past 5 years, really. I've talked to Scott Weeks over and over countless times, and I respectfully request that while we start talking about all this, the Board of Ed and the management for the public schools have a seat at the table. Nicole, you put out all these legislative agendas, and we had some great things that we could have added to it.
Hold up.
So I'm just saying.
I asked months and months to pull back on that. I had asked for months and months for you guys to send me information to be included.
Okay.
In our agenda, and you guys did not send it.
The thing is, we have a lot of people in this room, some that have already left, unfortunately, that all of a sudden we have a tipping point. We're ready to start talking about this. So make sure that the next time we have a Kirwan discussion, we have some other people here at the table. I've got a lot of stuff that I get every single time I go to a CFO meeting that's very similar to what they're talking about, but it's also the meat of what Kirwan is, what it does for special ed students, what it does for our non-English learners, what it does for our farm students. And so just like what Paul's saying, it's not all bad, but the price tag is so overwhelming. But a lot of it is also how you read the chart. Just like what you said, Mr. Williams, without the narrative of what the chart means, a lot of times it's lost. You can send out a mango chart and completely lose exactly what it means. There's a lot of funding that really just shifts. We're getting pre-K funding right now through this little tiny loophole that went through the legislative session at the very end. Well, that funding, we're still gonna have it. It's just being called Kirwan now. So there's a lot of things about this funding that we really need to understand and learn, and it's going to take both the commissioner's side and the Board of Ed side. So I just want to say it. What's happened in the past is the past, but from what's happening here, we just need to make sure that we do not make the same mistakes we've made before. So that's.
I think that the one point you made there, we've made it very clear here tonight that we want to reach out to the whole county because there are so many people. I mean, I bet if you walked out this door right now and the first person you asked that you came upon, if you said, "Do you know what Kirwan is?" They have no idea. And now hopefully we get enough publicity out of this meeting that it'll open some doors up. But that's why we have said we want to take this to Grantsville and McHenry and the farmers and the POA members, whoever. We want to get this out. We want it to be a discussion topic across this whole county, not just for this group, but the whole county.
Is the Republican going to talk about anything else this week?
Pardon?
You'll have to ask the Republican. But, one thing I'll comment on, as the conversation unfolds here, it's good to have public engagement. Mark, you're absolutely right. It's all of our responsibility. Back to Nicole's previous point of the information's out there. You can find it whether you go to MACO, whether you read the Board of Ed stuff, whether you read the Chamber of Commerce stuff. I don't care where you find it. The information's there. You can read it. And this meeting today, it's turned, and I knew it would we all knew it would happen. It's turned into Kirwan. And really, there's a lot wrapped into more than just Kirwan. And I think the takeaway is you're either for it or against it. And I hope that you've learned there's a lot more to it than that. So it's going to happen in some way, shape, or form, and it's going to cost money in some way, shape, or form. It could cost a little bit of money. It could cost a lot of money. We don't know that yet. in the worst case scenario, if it costs a lot of money, we as a county, and I don't think there are, I'm naive on this, and I understand that, and you can criticize me all you want by saying this. I don't think there is a Board of Ed side and a county side. We all live here. We all share the same constituencies. We're all trying to do what's best for the county. Everyone in here is going to disagree. I don't care what decisions are made about anything. Open a new school, close a school, or nothing at all with the school. Someone's going to be upset about it. We're beyond just, we got to at least have the conversations. The school part, one thing that a lot of people don't know is because I heard people say we love Friendsville School, and that's great. By law, the only body that has the authority to open or close a school is the elected Board of Education, period. The county commissioners have a lot of say in that indirectly through funding, grantedly, but we don't. You can tell us you love every school in the world, and we appreciate that, but we're not going to be the ones that decide that directly. Indirectly through funding, we kind of will be involved in that decision. We talk a lot. The notion out there that there's one side and there's no community. I just had a meeting a month ago with Mr. Woods and Mr. Paul and the superintendent and the director of finance, and our folks were there to have this conversation and have some of this to see what we can do. Mr. Paul and I meet probably monthly to talk about the challenges and to try to work through some of this stuff. So, the last thing I want to leave here today is, it's going to be the Board of Ed versus the county committee. We're all in the same boat. We're going to have, we have different focus, and there's going to be some different focus on how we approach the problem, but we're all trying to do what's best. And there's going to be, whether you come, every one of our meetings is public meeting and it's open. Every Board of Ed meeting is a public meeting and it's open. Other people have meetings that are public meetings that are open that we can talk about Kirwan at every single meeting we go to. And we can have meetings specifically for Kirwan and we can talk about it. But the other point is, which was made, if it's the same people in the room saying the same thing at every meeting, we're not really advancing the conversation very far. And it's good to see there are some new people here and there's new people talking here. And that's good. But the big piece for us isn't whether or not it's good to pay teachers more or it's good to educate 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. Most people will probably say yes to those things, I think. Some people may not, but I think most people would say yes. But it's how you pay for that becomes the conversation piece. So, Dr. McCartney, you had your hand up.
I had my hand up. I'm not going to talk about Kirwan.
Oh,
what a surprise.
The educated.
The educated. What gives me hope as I'm sitting here today is hearing from the audience that we need to pay attention to climate change. I think that's going to have a major impact on our population. I have to say I have not given enough sort of thought to climate change refugees. It seems to me that many of our problems in the school system, which I love the school system of course, has to do with decreased population. What a wonderful idea to reach out to people that need places to live, that are willing to work as a part of a community. So I'm hoping Mark and other people in our community really push forward with our need to plan for climate change and our need to grow our population and seize the opportunity. That will help our education. So.
You mentioned about expanding the conversation. Well, I agree with you. I hope it does expand. However, I'd like to say this. In order to expand it, could we have these meetings later in the evening? I tried to call several people today, and they, well, I can't get that early. So I do think it'd be a good idea to have it a little bit later.
Originally, this meeting was planned for 6 or 6:30 at the college a few weeks ago when they had a big snowstorm. We understand that, and yes, we agree. It's just that to get it in a timely fashion, this was the next public meeting. That's why we had it. And this isn't the best venue for it either. We understand that as well. Yes, sir.
One more thing. Since you have the most contact and have the best information with regard to the Kirwan, I guess I'm looking for an opinion from you. To the origination of this whole concept that they put forth here, do you believe it's for our past sins, if you will, that we haven't done enough, say, in the last 20 years? Or do you believe it's maybe because there's new ideas and new forward thinking with regard to how education is supposed to be?
In my conversations with the people on the committee, it's more the latter of that. Things change, Maryland here's real, this is
my conjecture, but we used to rank number 1 or 2 for like 10 years in a row in the rankings, and now we're like 5 or 6, and people are like, well, we can't be 5 or 6, we have to be 1 or 2, so let's look to try to do things to change that. And what are other countries mostly doing to have great school systems, and can we mimic that? One thing I would caution, we're talking about this, when you get into Kirwan, everybody's looking at the money, and that's it. And some people are looking at pre-K expansion, some people are looking at special ed. The Kirwan Commission report's about this thick, and there's a whole lot of stuff in there. Some of it won't mean a hill of beans to anybody in the room, but I'll give you one real example. One of the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission is to not allow students to get into career and technical education classes at all until they're a junior in high school. Right now, we allow our freshmen to get into those classes, and I would argue it's the best model, but that's another time and place. So a lot of people and a lot of my educator friends just look at it and think we're going to get more money, and that's what they focus on. But there might be some ancillary things in there that we may all disagree on from a programmatic standpoint that get lost completely because all anybody's looking at is the money. There's a whole lot wrapped into Kirwan that's being overlooked that, quite frankly, I think are bad ideas. Some of them are very good ones, but we're not even talking about that because we're just looking at what the money might cost either now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now.
Interesting that 2 times. Once with the trade school part of it, and now once again with when do you start things in school? Again, going back, I hate to go back that far. Nobody got algebra until they were in the 9th grade. Now, you probably give it to them in preschool. But that's why I asked that question of your opinion, and I appreciate it.
Well, I just wanted to add that as far as the pre-K expansion, one of the things is half day to full day, which we've been full day since we implemented the program. We basically have offered pre-K to anybody that has wanted pre-K for the last 5 or 8 years, maybe at least. So there are a lot of things, as Mrs. Schweitzer said, that are in Kirwan that won't cost the school system anything because the Board of Ed, we've been able to incorporate it, even some salary increases, which the board agreed to last year, that were incorporated totally through the operating budget. I think our issue is in the capital. Our issue has been in capital. We have lost enrollment, but we've also cut a lot of staff along with that. So there is a lot in Kirwan. You're absolutely right, but some of the things we already as a system have been implementing for a number of years. So there's not a dollar figure attached to it because it's already a part of what we're already doing every single day.
And that's a great point, and I appreciate that. Before we wrap up, and I do appreciate all of the comments and your time. We've been here for a while now, and we will follow up. I do want to reiterate that the presentation will be online. Ms. Ranker, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Good.
My name is Fawn Ranker, and I have just 2 comments, not pertaining to Kirwan either. When you talk about the state rate capacity, some of you may have been in our board meetings or even watched our board meetings that are televised. Just last year, in 2019, the state changed our figures for state rate capacity. which we didn't realize it until it had happened. When the schools were built, that's what the state rate capacity was, and they changed, but they've really changed. Some schools might have been 10, 12%. I don't have my papers in front of me. Rooms that were not counted previously are now counted and considered into your state rate capacity. So that does make a factor that the state made the change just last year. And then on one slide, you had the GC Public School Strategic Facility Plan. It had an estimated $30 million, basically for capital improvement projects for the school system. I would just like to say that we did have a committee. They spent a significant time on it. And last month, they presented the plan to us, and the board accepted it for consideration. And if anybody would, I'd appreciate it, we all would like it if you would look at it. It's over a 100-page report. There's a whole bunch of different options on there. And that was just like, I believe, one page from it, but the board did not discuss what we are actually going to do. So I just wanted people to know that, yes, those are all things that need to be done, and there's other things too, but we have not actually set forth that we are doing A, B, C, or D. That is going to come in time. So I just wanted to say that we did have a discussion, and it was voted on for consideration, but we have not made any plans on what we are doing. And again, about the state rate capacity, the state had changed. Rooms that were never counted before are now counted. So that does make several of our numbers an impact on them. So it's not really the enrollment, it's how the state did their figuring. I just wanted to let everybody know that. Thank you.
And to wrap up on a positive note, it's nice to hear back to Superintendent Baker's comment on universal pre-K, which we've basically been doing for a while in Garrett County, that whenever the state has a great idea that they want to implement statewide, like the scholarship program or universal pre-K, they always come here because we did it first and we did it best, and they want to copy us. So hopefully, and I'll tell you something else, and I know broadband gets a lot of attention. We got the best IT department in the state. They're asked to present all over the country, not just in the state, but all over the country, because most people will tell you that Garrett County does rural broadband. Now, I know if you're sitting here right now without it, you're not going to believe this statement. I understand that. But as a county, we do broadband rurally better than anybody else, and the proof in that is sitting right there, and his team. They get asked to go to Seattle, they get asked to go to Texas, they get asked to do every state presentation because everyone recognizes that we do it well, just like the scholarship program and just like public education.
There's no pay raise in the budget for you. So.
Down my report.
I saw the red light go off, that's why I said that. So, Mark.
I just wanted to add one thing regarding the Kirwan report, is that and I agree with you, there's some really good stuff in there that would really benefit the schools, and some of it obviously is already happening here. But the thing that is hard to determine is that there could be an economic benefit to this program being adopted statewide for the state of Maryland. So if you've got adjacent states that maybe have failing school systems, it could actually be a draw to Maryland. I mean, that's something that's really hard to calculate because that's a bit of a risk and a gamble. But they do show that people value education, particularly public school education that's free, as opposed to paying for private school, but yet maybe the caliber of that education is comparable to going to private school. So it's kind of like, to me, it's a real balancing act of what's that worth. It's kind of a value system that the state would have to determine.
And the proponents of Kirwan as written will cite that particular. All right, we thank you all for coming out, and again, the next meeting is here on the 21st.